As the temperatures begin to rise and continue to rise across the country, just imagine a day similar to a day I think we're experiencing, and I believe also there in Iowa, where the temperatures are going to be falling, but they'll probably intersect about where it feels right now on a September day. So imagine yourself getting to September, and we're going to bask in the midst of another fall Saturday between Iowa and Iowa State. And we will talk it up here for the next hour on the Voice of College Football as we put Cyhawk front and center, continuing our opponent series, looking at the Hawkeyes schedule for 2022. And of course, this is one of the big events on the college football calendar, not just for the Cyclones and for the Hawkeyes. Corey, as we bring in Corey Barta from the Hawkeye of the Storm each and every week, he's the guy that makes this show go. But I know that you enjoy discussing this series, and we will bring in, of course, Levi Stevenson from SB Nation to give us the Iowa State perspective.
As I recall, last time we had him on, have you recalled the last time we had him on?
I'm already anticipating some type of fireworks.
No, hey, I'm a little bit under the weather today. My mic is starting to collapse on me. I'm a little bit under the weather today. So maybe that'll tame me down a little bit. Look, it's May. I'm not going to, last year, everybody knows that Levi basically, if I recall, Levi basically said that Iowa State had the upper hand at every position. And we all know what happened on the field, Mark. Okay, so I'm not going to fall for the bait. I will say this. I'm looking forward to it. The Cyhawk game this year is going to be intriguing because there's a lot of turnover on that Iowa State roster. First time that game has been played in Iowa City since, let's do the math here, 2018, because the game was not played in 2020. So there's a storyline for you. It's always it's a fun game, and I do like Iowa's chances. It'll be interesting to see who ends up being the starting quarterback at Iowa State. It looks like it's going to be the tall lefty whose name escapes me. But that's a big position of question for the Cyclones as well. So I'll be interested to get Levi's perspective. I know there's a couple housekeeping items we want to get to first, though. Correct, Mark?
Absolutely. So just after last week's show, Corey reminded me that there was a commit in the 2023 class, and that would be one in the athlete category, Zach Letmer, who comes in at 6'1", 190. So Corey has produced some content on his channel. Please check out from the Hawkeye of the Storm and his rundown and profile on Zach Letmer. But what do we know about him? Again, when we see that term athlete, I don't know which direction we're going in terms of a projected position.
Well, the recruiting sites, it sounds through the information provided through these recruiting sites, it sounds like I was recruiting him as a DB. So that should tickle the ears of fans because I have no reason to doubt Phil Parker in evaluating a potential defensive back, even a guy who is playing, quarterback in high school. Now he's obviously playing defense as well, but I watch him on tape and I observed this during the video I produced last week. He's a really good ball handler, a really good runner. He's got some good agility, so he's probably going to end up being a safety at Iowa. But I mentioned this last Tuesday on our show, Mark, and I really have not had the time to go back and track this, but it seems like I was recruiting more high school quarterbacks, unless I'm just missing something and maybe they've been doing this the whole time. We know that these smaller schools, typically the best athlete, not always, but a lot of times the best athlete on the field is also going to play quarterback. That doesn't mean he's going to play quarterback at the collegiate level. But here's a kid from Central Lyon High Senior High in Rock Rapids, Iowa. That's far, far northwest Iowa. Who played quarterback, did it very well, albeit at the Class 2A level. All right, very similar to Preston Reese, who we talked about in the last show. His two only offers besides Iowa, South Dakota, and South Dakota State. Ironically enough, we talked with Tyler Merriam last week about South Dakota State because that's who Iowa plays. So Iowa beats out two FCS schools for Zach Letmer. So a lot of Iowa fans, I heard some Iowa fans this week kind of complaining about it. We got another kid that's got, no zero-star recruit according to this side. And listen, I'm not going to argue with Phil Parker. All right. And if Iowa was offering a quarterback who's a 0-star, that's different. But I think Phil Parker knows what he's doing. He's 6'1", 190. He's got the size. But again, small town school. Did look like Iowa State was in on him. No reported offer. Minnesota was also, according to 247, was in on him. But he looks like a good commit. But again, I am not the expert to project a guy who a lot of his highlight tape that I watched was at quarterback, and Phil Parker sees him as a safety. So it's an intriguing one, but the class of 23 is not that far away. Here we are, May of 22.
Well, the rest of us would like to see Iowa venture into the transfer portal for a quarterback option. They're taking possibly a different strategy. I am, of course, kidding.
Yeah, well, can we just before we transition to our discussion about Iowa State, you mentioned transfer portal, so can we talk about Gary Barta for a moment?
Sure.
So that's a topic that, of course, got brought up late last week, and I did a live stream on this very topic. But Gary Barta basically went on an Iowa podcast. It was actually a school-hosted podcast, and stated to Gary Dolphin that Gary Barta is actively, he is an advocate against the one-time transfer rule. He's trying to get that reversed, basically. And the line of reasoning that he gave makes sense, right? It would diffuse some of the recruit by NIL activity that's out there right now. And I understand where he's coming from. But see, this is the problem with Gary Barta, and I don't want to make this a Gary Barta show because it's not. And I spent an hour and a half talking about this last week. But this is the problem with Gary Barta that continues to happen, continues to rear its ugly head. Gary Barta does not understand PR. Okay, he does not understand logistically how to advance the Iowa brand. Everybody says he's a great fundraiser. I said maybe this is a bit harsh, but I said on my show last week that a monkey might be able to fundraise at Iowa. I mean, it's not that hard. There's a lot of very, very happy alums. There's a lot of wealthy people around the Iowa program, just like every other Big Ten program. But there's no pro sports here in Iowa. People love Iowa sports, very similar to how people love Iowa State sports. So that is not an excuse. And to me, it just is a bad look, regardless if you agree with the reason why Barta is advocating against it. You and I both agree, Mark, that college athletics as it currently stands needs a major renovation because of NIL, because of the transfer portal. But you go on the record especially when you have a basketball program that has been in desperate need of a center, and they've been outspoken about going to the portal for a center. When you have your AD saying you're working to abolish the one-time transfer rule, why would a kid want to come to a school that has an AD that's working against what that transfer is actually trying to take advantage of? It makes no sense. It doesn't look good. It's not helping the cause of Fran McCaffrey. We know Kirk Ferentz probably agrees with Gary Barta wholeheartedly. He's not in favor of the transfer portal either. But again, I keep hearing this, and Fran McCaffrey said this last week, you have to adapt. And you can work behind the scenes to try to fix things, but in the meantime, you have to adapt or you will fall behind. So I just thought it was a bad look for Gary Barta. We're used to bad looks from him. It's frustrating. Somebody made the comparison to Jamie Pollard the other day. Jamie Pollard is the exact opposite for the most part. He's had some gaffes over the years. And of course, when you're in the public eye, that's going to happen. But just a bad look for Gary Barta, and it does not help the cause for Iowa men's basketball.
At a time in college athletics when the trend is surging toward player freedom of movement and rights within the legal system of this country, and I would think that that this would not have much merit nor support by too many people. If anything, I think we should be clinging to the one-time transfer rule of it not being abolished in the opposite direction to give complete player freedom to transfer whenever they'd like.
And I know this is a football show, Mark, and one more thing to add on this before we move on. It also is a terrible look when you have one of the more outspoken athletes nationally in college athletics on this issue was Jordan Bohannon, okay, who's a sixth-year senior, just graduated. I mean, I shouldn't say just graduated. Graduated 2-3 years ago, but finally off campus. So to have him be here for 6 years, openly advocating for full player freedoms, and working for NIL and then have your AD go on the record and say this. It just doesn't look good collectively. I just don't understand how a person can think that this is in the best interest of your program. And you can say all you want that, well, I'm in the best interest of college athletics. He's in the best interest of the program. He should be working for the best interest of the program. And it's just, I do think it ignites the conversation that Iowa fans have wanted to have for years. And that is Gary Barta, has he overstayed his welcome? And I'm beginning to lean that direction. I've not openly said that he needs to be fired, but how many passes are you going to give a guy who's been the AD here for far longer than anybody expected? So we can move on from that discussion, but it does spill over into football, Mark. And so I thought we'd bring it up. Regrettably.
Absolutely. So we continue our opponents series, looking at one of the great rivalries in college football, and a rivalry that probably does not get its due on a national scale from year to year. But of course, in the state of Iowa, it means everything. It's Cyhawk, and it's typically the second week of the season, as it will be here on September 10th this season. We've got our guy, Levi Stevenson, joining us from SB Nation's Wide Right Natty Light, one of the great names on SB Nation.
In a network full of good.
First time I had you on.
There's lots of good names on the SB Nation network.
Oh, there is.
But I think we've got a good one.
I enjoyed that one because, of course, Wide Right is associated with Florida State. They've got a few national championships to its name, but it's just a tremendous play on words and fits the program status and history to a T. Levi, how are you doing?
Not too bad. As always, it's another good day to be a Cyclone. So.
Okay, that's good to know. Corey, did you hear that? Good day to be a Cyclone.
So he says. Okay. So he says, Mark.
This is most entertaining and most beneficial for the viewers, both from an information standpoint, insight standpoint, but also entertainment standpoint. If I just kind of open up the floodgates and serve something up and then just back off, kick back and enjoy the show between you two.
You like to try to do that, Mark, but I don't plan on falling for that bait this year. You're going to be involved in this conversation.
I came here for the bait, man. I blocked out times in my schedule for the bait.
On May 17th. He came here for the bait on May 17th, Mark.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to start it this way, Levi. Of course, Matt Campbell's built this program. There was a core of personnel that, especially on offense, that people identified with, that became nationally known, starting with Brock Purdy at quarterback, arguably the best running back in the nation in Breece Hall. Xavier Hutchinson still is with the team. Charlie Kohler, a tight end, an offensive line that was both talented and experienced and productive. Disappointing season because of all of that coming together following a Big 12 championship game appearance the year before. Now, Matt Campbell, maybe for the first time, facing the adversity or challenge of, okay, we built to this point. Now that core has left. Now what do we have? How do we sustain it? Kind of get us comfortable with this Iowa State 2022 collection, which most of college football sees as a bit of a mystery team. We're unfamiliar with a lot of these guys that are going to step in.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because, like you said, we got really used to, the Iowa State football had kind of the same cast of characters for the last three years for sure. You could go back to 4 for some other guys, and even 5 or 6 if you go to talk about Charlie Kohler and Chase Allen, and Andy Wazirike. So we got used to a core of guys. So like you said, it's the first, aside from when he got here, it's the first time that we've seen where he's had a pretty new starting lineup, a new starting 11 on each side of the ball that doesn't have a ton of returns. I mean, there are, like you said, there are some big names still returning. A Ryan Vance at linebacker, Anthony Johnson, who's now moved back to safety. And Jarrell Brock is a guy who didn't play. He hasn't played a ton up to this point because he was a big recruit. Xavier Hutchinson is back. They and Trevor Downing, they still have guys coming back that people will recognize and stuff like that. But like you said, you lose Andy Wazirike and Mike Rose and Brock Purdy and Breece Hall and Charlie Kohler and Chase Allen. A lot of names that you lose out of there, and then a couple other through the transfer portal as well. So it's an interesting time though, because if this was a previous time in Iowa State football history, this would be like, we're gonna drop back down type of thing. We're hoping for 4 or 5, we're hoping for a bowl game type of thing. We're in a different era of Iowa State football now. A little bit of uncharted territory, but we're in a different era now too, where there's more talent on the roster than there's ever been objectively, and it's not even close. You have new guys stepping in a lot of places, quarterback and running back, and some newer young receivers, corner, some new linebackers, things like that. But the talent that's there has gotten a lot of snaps as a role player, as a backup up to this point. But the talent is there now. The level of talent that's sitting on the 2 deep and on the 3 deep is way ahead of where it has been. So, like you said, it's a little bit of uncertainty, just because we as fans are not 100% what it looks like to reload as opposed to rebuild, and we don't know for sure if this is reload or rebuild. But the talent level seems to indicate that we're more reload than rebuild. So this is a little bit uncharted territory. So we're not 100% sure how confident to be about this, but looking at the raw pieces that are there, it's still a very exciting time in Iowa State football for sure.
This is me kicking back.
Yeah,
okay.
I see you're trying, Mark, and I'm respectfully ignoring you.
I mean, obviously the big piece, the big one is that Brock Purdy is gone. He has, started for 3.5 years, every single game after Iowa State not having a continuous starting quarterback, started an entire season since like 2010 with Austin Arnaud. You had Brock Purdy, who started 3.5 years without missing a single snap, or without missing a single game, I should say. And now you have a new guy, Hunter Dekkers. Hunter Dekkers was a highly rated quarterback, low 4-star quarterback, dual threat guy, big time arm. I believe he graduated high school as Iowa High School's all-time leader in total offensive yards on an individual level. Extremely talented guy, big time arm talent, good runner. He's bigger, taller, faster, stronger than Brock Purdy. Just a better athlete overall. The key will be, obviously, what does his development look like? He hasn't played a ton of snaps up to this point. The snaps he has played, at times he's flashed some really excellent talent, and at times he's looked like a young guy that hasn't played a lot. When he came in against Iowa last year, we saw some really good stuff out of Hunter Dekkers. Looked like a guy that can really develop going forward, but also had some young guy mistakes, and that's just something that happens. But the ceiling with Hunter Dekkers there, if he develops like we think he can, is extremely high. It's probably higher than when Brock is. That's not a dig at Brock at all, but Hunter's got physical tools that Brock just didn't have. And you have, Jarrell Brock, who is right behind Breece Hall, actually was a little bit ahead of Breece Hall in the recruiting rankings. He's a very, very talented player in his own. And the pieces are all there on offense to have a very highly productive offense, and arguably a more explosive offense, given the extra arm strength on Hunter Dekkers and the speed at receiver, in an offense that probably won't be quite so tight and focused, so it has the potential to be more explosive. But again, like it has for the last however many years at Iowa State, how productive the offense is going to heavily rely on the offensive line, and that is a question mark, as it has been every year. And that's honestly the biggest knock on Campbell so far, aside from not beating Iowa, or whatever, is the offensive line. Just like sometimes it looks really good and sometimes it doesn't. It's inconsistency. Now, and like I said before, offensive lines take a long time to build. You can't just go from having a bad offensive line to having a good offensive line, overnight like that. You just can't. I mean, maybe the blue bloods can with the transfer portal, but like for the most part, anybody that's not a blue blood they have to build from within. They have to build through recruiting, through player development, and all that, and that takes a long time. And we're starting to see those talented guys that they have brought in and they're starting to sneak to the top of the depth chart now, and they're starting to get more snaps. It's still a question mark. If the offensive line is good, this offense has a chance to be every bit as good as it was with Brock Purdy at the helm, if not a little bit better. But that's going to 100% depend on the offensive line, and that's what we got to see. Trevor Downing's back after being injured, after being banged up a lot last year. He's moved to center, so he's your quarterback of the offensive line. He can direct traffic quite a bit in there, and that's having a guy that's experienced and as talented as Trevor Downing in the center, in the interior of that line, it can be extremely valuable, and hopefully that will be enough to get that group to take a step forward.
Okay, I will ask you a question, Levi.
What you got?
First of all, Good to see you. It's been a
Good to
while.
see you too, man.
Okay, so I will say this. This is not meant as a snide remark, and I mean this. It's not meant as a snide remark, but is there any part of the Iowa State fan base that is somewhat relieved? Like, listen, I'll be honest. There's part of me that's sort of relieved that Jordan Bohannon is gone. Like, I'm going to miss Jordan Bohannon. I'm going to miss what he gave. But, I was at that Iowa State game, and I observed to my friend this year, and Iowa lost that game in Hilton, but I observed to a friend of mine who was sitting next to me every time he got the ball, Iowa State fans booing.
Yeah.
And it just got a little bit over, and I wasn't necessarily, I thought it was a little bit too much from the Iowa State fans, but I understand why they did it because I think Jordan Bohannon sparked a lot of that. But I guess my thing is, I felt like in that moment he was maybe a little bit bigger than he had made himself a little bit bigger than what he should have.
He made himself a pretty easy target for boos.
And I get that to a degree. I think there maybe both sides deserve a little bit of blame, but regardless, I'm not trying to.
People are always going to drift to being more than they need to be.
True.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to imply that Purdy is guilty of the same antics that Bohannon is, but Purdy had his faults, as you are well aware.
Sure.
Whether you want to blame him directly, as Coach John Patterson, when he's on this show, always brings up, the quarterback takes too much blame when you lose. He takes too much credit when they win. He was not able to beat Iowa. And that's just one thing. That's one aspect. Campbell hasn't been able to do it either. Maybe Deckers can get him over the top. But he's also something that I think of when I think of Brock Purdy is gaffes. And he seemed to have a number of these kind of crazy plays. I think of the TCU throw where he's throwing it backwards. It ends up being a pick six
there was
or
always
fumble
one
six.
or two. Every game there was like one or two where there were some head scratchers. But then that same game he would also make just two plays that make your jaw drop. So like they usually kind of washed for the most part. There was games where he had a few more gaps than jaw-dropping plays, and there was other games where it went the other way, and Brock looked ridiculously good.
And a big part of me, a big part of me was sad when I saw Brock Purdy's last play of his career.
It sucked.
Where he knocks the ball forward, and that's just, I hate to say this because he did win a lot of games. I think of the Fiesta Bowl, but for that to be the last game, it almost encompassed his struggles. All in one play. It's like
a little bit, yeah. Because he especially that last quarter there, he was willing Iowa State down the field because like the offensive line was struggling a little bit. They couldn't get the running game going. Brock Purdy he put the team on his back and was pushing that team down the field by himself. And he was trying to do it again, and it just kind of a bad luck. The Clemson guy did a good job of peanut punching that thing out of there. He did an excellent play by the Clemson defensive player. I certainly wouldn't want to take anything from him. But yeah, it's kind of like he was in the middle of making one of those jaw-dropping plays, and then just some bad luck happens, and that's just kind of. And
I think I'm confused now. So let me get this straight. It's been a while since I watched that game back. So that was not that was the fumble, as he had gotten the first down. The ball gets fumbled backwards. I'm thinking of the play must have been earlier in the game where he tries to knock down a
that was earlier in the game where he was still trying to do too much, but that was earlier in the game. His last play, the last play was him breaking some tackles and pushing forward and getting the first down.
Okay,
and the Clemson guy came up from behind and punched it out.
Okay,
yeah.
So, but both of those plays, I hate to say it, but they kind of just encompass his struggles. I'm not saying
I don't know if the first one does as much. I mean, it's a bad luck, and it's not like it's in like he has had that. I don't know if I'd say it encompasses Brock Purdy. The last one probably does a better job of encompassing it, where he's doing a lot. He's doing what he needs to do, and something just bad kind of happened. And so the first one was kind of just a weird thing, just trying to do too much. But that was
the odds of either one of those plays happening is just.
They're just
remarkable.
They're crazy plays. I mean, what you love about Brock Purdy is some of the things that frustrate you. He's a lot like I think I've said it on this show too. He looks like he's a lot like Brett Favre. You take the good with the bad. He's gonna make some excellent plays. He's gonna make some really plays that you're just like, holy cow. And there's sometimes where he's just gonna make just a play that just doesn't make any sense at all, and it's just gonna be boneheaded. But that's part of what you love about him is the dude that. There are very few people in college football that I've seen that competed harder than Brock on a play-to-play basis. And there's a reason that all of his teammates, all of his coaches, Matt Campbell treats him like thought of him like another son basically or whatever. I mean, there's a reason that all of his teammates would go to war for that kid. And they said that in press conferences that how much everybody loves Brock and all that. I mean, there's a reason for that. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So I think where I think you were going with your question though is like Iowa State fans kind of relieved that we're moving on kind of thing. And I think that's probably how I describe it. It's not like we're relieved that he's gone or anything like that, because we still love. I mean, he's the all-time leader at Iowa State in basically every stat that matters for a quarterback, and by a lot. I mean, he's still the best quarterback that's come through Ames ever, and it's probably not even that close. We're right. I think we were ready to move on to the next guy just to see what happened. What something different looks like. Definitely, I wouldn't call it like relieved. It's a bittersweet thing. It's like. It sucks that he's leaving because Brock's such an incredible. He's a great football player, but he's such an incredible ambassador for the program, for the school, and all that. I mean, like he's gonna make a fabulous, backup quarterback / spot starter in the NFL. Maybe he gets his shot and he's a good starter. I don't know. But even if he, it would not shock me to see Brock Purdy last in the league to have a 10, 12-year NFL career as a backup, because he is a phenomenal person, leader. He's a guy you want on your side in the locker room, and he's a good football player. He can come in and make plays when he needs to, but just an excellent human being. And so it sucks to lose that. But we're ready to move on to Hunter Deckers and see what the program can do going forward without the same guys all the time.
Levi, one of the reasons why I phrased and framed the initial question the way I did about there being adversity or a challenge facing Matt Campbell, certainly he had a challenge when he first took the job, so he's not adverse to challenges, but this being a different one, is that when I review, and it's ironic that we mentioned the Clemson game, when I review other programs that were built from, let's say, decent to great in Clemson's case, the coach comes in and he truly coaches up that initial wave of players that he inherited, or even the wave or two that he initially recruited, and it's very much maximizing the talent. But then in lifting that program to the next level, then there's a wave of, okay, now we're bringing in some studs. Now we're bringing some players that are expected to win and elevate the program, that are even better players, even though we love this initial group. And that may be a difficult ask at Iowa State. Do you see that that thought process that I have, and where do you see the recruiting, and where do you see this program taking off from this point?
Yeah, so it's a good question. As far as kind of pushing to that next level, like I said, we're kind of in uncharted territory with Iowa State. There's really no precedent for it going from good to great. And I think I've mentioned it before too, where, going from 4 or 5 to 7 or 8 wins is a lot easier than going from 8 to 10 wins. That gap to go from good to great is a much harder gap to cover than going from to good. And but I'm looking at recruiting. I mean, I think of Matt Campbell's 6 recruiting classes, I think like 4 or 5 of them are in the top 5. Like he owns basically every good recruiting class in Iowa State history. And the last 3 have been getting better and better and better, and he's been recruiting better athletes. Like I said, the talent on this roster, from a recruiting perspective, is as high as it's ever been. He just landed, this past class, he landed Hunter Deo, which is one of the best prospects of the 2022 class, and kind of stole him from Iowa, which was a big, huge recruiting win. That Iowa State's here to play now in the state of Iowa for these top end prospects, and these classes are getting better and better and better. So from that perspective, we'll see what it looks like, going forward. What does Matt Campbell do? We know what Matt Campbell can do with undervalued talent. He can turn them into a good football team. What can he do with good talent that other people wanted, and that they weren't necessarily diamonds in the rough because other people were looking at them, and we were able to get them over other good schools. What can he do with those players? That's the question that's got to be answered. I'm very excited to see that answer, because I think he's the right guy to do it. Looking at a guy like Bill Snyder, what he did at Kansas State, where he took them from terrible to good, and he was able to sustain them from good to great at, anywhere in that for a long, long time. If, that's your blueprint right there. If Matt Campbell does what Bill Snyder does, it's a wild success. I don't know if we're going to get there. That, that kind of longevity doesn't really exist in this world anymore. But personality-wise, if anybody's going to do it, it might be Matt Campbell. But we'll see. That's a long ways off. But, we're focused. You kind of got to focus on this year. But as far as I'm concerned, the trajectory of the program, even though you're losing all that core that won so many games for Iowa State, the trajectory of the program is still as good as it's ever been.
Mark, I'm a Bill Snyder fan, but when was Bill Snyder and Kansas ever great?
Kansas State won a
Kansas State.
Kansas State won a Big 12 title in the early 2000s.
They won a couple. They won at least two. He won two or three.
They were excellent there.
Okay, so
depending on your, like we had the elite conversation a few weeks ago on a couple call-in shows, and I think there has to be some sustainability. I would have never called Kansas State elite.
No. But they were.
Oh yeah, they were going to BCS bowl games.
Yeah, they were really good. Like when Darren Sproles was there.
He had a number of Colin Klein. They had a number of at various iterations during his first tenure there. They got to that top 10 ranked at the end of this. I bet he coached 5 top 10 teams.
Yeah, for a decade there, they were consistently in the top 10.
So Levi, is Iowa a great program in your book?
They're not really consistently in the top 10, are they?
Well, but for a while they were. For a while they absolutely were. I mean, think of the stretch from 2002 to 2005.
Oh,
that's 3 years.
Well, no, that's
three straight top 10s. Okay.
Well, that's good. I mean that's a good stretch.
I'm just saying,
that was 15 years ago, but
that's a minor thing that I'm picking with you, but I just
I mean
great in my mind.
A good stretch. One of like, because I think I've mentioned now, I've got 3 Iowa football players all time that I like that I would want on Iowa State, and that's now Tory Taylor is now part of that. Micah Hyde and
Chad Greenway.
No, that wasn't one of them. It's a good honorable mention.
Sure.
No, it was Micah Hyde, Tory Taylor, and who was my other one? I don't know. I'll think of them later. But maybe it's only 2 now. I don't know. Maybe it's just a punter. Maybe it's just a punter and a safety.
I'm not understanding your comment, Levi. So there are obviously dozens, if not hundreds, of Iowa Hawkeye players you would like to have had.
It's 3 of them that I like enough that I would also graciously accept them onto our football team, and I respect them enough to say I like that guy.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
the rest of them, I'll say that's a good player, but he can eat shit because he went to Iowa.
Okay.
Really?
But
Linderbaum's
like I said,
not on the list.
Tyler Linderbaum.
Yeah. God. I mean, what has Tyler Linderbaum ever done?
He doesn't move the needle for me.
Given thousands of dollars to the Children's Hospital, hasn't taken a penny
but lots of people have
NIL
done
money.
really good things. That's not
Best
taking
center
anything.
in the country.
That's great for Linderbaum. That's great that he did that or whatever. But I mean, like lots of people do good stuff all the time.
Yeah, but you like Iowa State, you realize how much the average Iowa State fan would love to have the best center in the country.
Oh yeah, absolutely would. Yeah.
But he's not.
I don't know if I want him enough to bring an Iowa player on, but
sure.
Okay.
You make sense of it, Mark. I'll let you make sense of that comment.
I thought Levi was going to fire back with having one of the best centers in the country simultaneously.
I say last year Colin Newell and now Trevor Downing. I mean, you could argue like, at least going into last season that if Tyler Linderbaum was number 1 center, Colin Newell was number 2 or 3. He's up there now. He was banged up a lot last year, enough to where he actually just retired from football instead of taking his COVID year or moving on.
Yeah, the difference is Linderbaum was leaps, and the numbers would suggest that Linderbaum was leaps and bounds above anybody below him. So maybe,
and that's fine. I like him enough to take him on because he wore black and gold for a while, so that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so
I'm willing to sabotage my own team and to not give safe harbor to Iowa football players.
When we conduct these rivalry shows, we always run the risk. Well, we run a lot of risks with you two, but we run the risk in general of giving too much attention to one side, and then we obviously have an Iowa show here, and then a lot of people will either just dive into this conversation and love it, and we could go on for hours and hours and hours. For some people, other people are like, what do we care about Iowa State? Get him off there. So we run that risk. So we do have a super chat we'd like to honor. And then I have a question for Corey that's related to this rivalry and some discussions we've had in the past few months. So, Erica, we appreciate your contribution. Thank you so much for that. Hi, guys. A few things. Number one, is this game at Kinnick? And so
Yes.
Corey answered that earlier. Yes, it is for the first time since 2018. Secondly, Mark, who do you think will win and why? So we have the Iowa State expert and we have the Iowa expert, but Erica is going to ask me who's going to win the game. Please gently press the like button to this video. That's a little inside joke between the three of us, Corey, Erica, and myself about gently. We don't need to smash the like button, but thank you. Go Hawks. Okay. Erica, boy, when I set up the first question for Levi as a mystery team when talking about Iowa State, I knew for a just general college football guy, knew that Iowa State team coming into 2021, as I did the 20 team and probably even the 2019 team. I don't know a heck of a whole lot about this Iowa State team. I will be studying and doing my homework this off season during the summer months as the preseason publications come out and as I check out Wide Right Natty Light, of course, and their preview material on Iowa State football. I have to think, of course, Kinnick is a difficult place to win, that I'm leaning fairly heavily on the Iowa side. But again, with that huge unknown of Iowa State football and we got the quarterback rundown of Hunter Deckers. I will ask this before I get to the Corey question, and maybe you did touch upon this. Maybe I just missed this. Has he won the job, or is this still a battle?
No,
it's his job. Okay.
Yeah. He had the job. He had this year's starting job won before last season. I mean, he was always the heir. He was always the heir apparent.
Okay. All right. Corey, for you. So we've had the conversation, of course. We're both very respectful of the work and the tremendous job that Kirk Ferentz has done at Iowa. However, we have been critical of his handling of certain aspects of the team. Do you think that one of the reasons why maybe he's less criticized is because of the dominance in this series? Does this game mean that much to Iowa fans?
It really has no impact. I hate to say that. I mean, I'm not saying that.
Bullshit.
I'm not
Really?
saying that it's. Listen,
Really?
I'm not saying that it's not something that Iowa fans want. But when
Not
I'm
to cut
grading,
you off, how many consecutive wins?
well, they haven't lost since 14. So do the
whatever
math
that
on
is.
that.
15 through, they didn't play 1 year. 15 through 21 would be 7, so 6 consecutive wins.
6 consecutive wins.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So if he had split those games,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's obviously. I know it's a hypothetical question, but what I'm saying is when I'm thinking about my average fans grading Kirk Ferentz, they're grading them on wins, losses. Unfortunately, I think they should be grading them on championships. That's where my big thing is. And see, Matt Campbell, Iowa State fans are like,
What?
"Oh, championships!
Okay.
We don't want championships."
Okay. I got to step in here for a
this
second.
is phenomenal.
Go ahead.
I got to step in here for a second
because
because the idea
would be the
idea that you're grading Kirk Ferentz on championships is nonsense. You have to win one before you can grade him on championships.
Well, he has won. He has won a couple.
2003?
Which is 2 more than
Was that,
Matt
actually, I think I
Campbell has
nailed
won.
that. I think it was 2003 or 2002.
I'm going to fuel the fire on Levi's
2002
side.
and
They were shared
2004.
championships. I'm going to help Levi out a little bit there.
The 2014 was a fraud burger. So you know what? Like, I mean, or was it 14? What was the year that they went undefeated in the regular season, then lost to Michigan State, and then got shat on
15.
by Christian McCaffrey?
You mean 15?
15.
When they
I don't care about Iowa State football. I don't care about Iowa
when they
football
won the
enough.
West. Okay.
Yeah. So and then that was humongous fraud burger. Anyways, you cannot measure. That'd be like. That's like Iowa State measuring Matt Campbell on championships. Like you gotta win one. You gotta win one outright, or before you can even.
Listen. First of all, I have been extremely critical. Obviously, he hasn't watched a single one of my breakdowns, Mark. But as you know, I've been very critical of Kirk Ferentz for that very reason. So if you listen to my explanation, my reason is I believe that there should be more of an emphasis placed on championships. Okay, so they won the West last year, which is a step forward. And so my big thing has been now we have to get to the next level of winning Big Ten championships and that being an expectation or at least a significant goal. And I don't believe it is. I think a West championship is a goal. I think we now need to move the needle to, okay, we're in the 23rd, 24th year of Kirk Ferentz. We need to get to the goal being conference championships, which is hard because, there's not apples to apples. It's not going to be apples to apples if Matt Campbell stays here because you don't have a program in the Big 12 anymore that is anything close to what Ohio State is. You are not going to have that.
I mean, Oklahoma and Texas are still in the Big 12.
Well, but I'm saying once they're gone.
Once they're gone, yes.
I'm not. I can see Iowa State winning some championships, and I'm not saying that that's an excuse for. Like I said, these two programs should not be weighed in comparison.
I think one thing that I think we'll be able to grade it a little bit better in 10 years once the new Big 12 has been together for a while. But I do believe, while there is not an Ohio State in the new Big 12, there's also not aside from Kansas, right? But there's not really Kansas is the only bad program in that new Big 12. The rest of them are either pretty good.
So who are the bad programs in the Big 10?
Purdue's terrible. Illinois is terrible. Indiana's had one good season.
So Illinois
is kind of whatever.
Hold on a second. So Rutgers and Illinois.
First
of all, it's a 14-team conference, Levi.
Right.
So let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, and half the conference is booty.
Shiano went 5-7, which is far better than some of the worst programs in the Power 5. I'm thinking of, I don't know what did Kansas go last year?
I don't know.
2-10.
2-10.
2-10. Okay, so that's not really. That's not even. You shouldn't even compare those two schools because Rutgers is.
I don't know what Maryland went.
7-6.
Maryland,
Really?
Maryland won their bowl game.
Interesting.
So and Illinois is under. I guarantee you, and this is all just projecting forward, but with Brett Bielema there, that's going to be a decent program. Listen, you're going to have, when you have a bigger conference, you have to have bad teams, correct, Mark? Somebody has to lose.
It's math.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Big 12 in 23, the Big 12 is going to have 14 teams, and only one of them is going to be bad. So,
Levi, is the Big 10 not the second best conference in America?
We go.
It's better than the Big 12
on an
right?
average. Yes, I think it's better at the top end. I don't think it's deeper.
You don't think the Big 10 is deeper?
Deeper, no. I think it's better at the top end.
Deeper mediocre, or deeper good?
Like from top to bottom. Like, what is your bottom half? What is the
Big
bottom half in the Big 12?
Like half the league is good.
And the rest is not good.
Yeah, but I mean good. I mean real good. I mean
I'm talking like
9-4 good. I mean like Purdue going 9-4. I mean like Minnesota going 9-4.
Look at the new Big 12. Cincinnati just went to the playoff. BYU's perennially very good. UCF has been good.
Those teams, first of all, aren't even in the Big 12 yet. So why are we talking about UCF
they will be when
Cincinnati?
When the Big 12 is 14 teams, they will be in the Big 12, which is when we're comparing apples to apples.
That's not now. You're telling me what their records were last year. We're talking about the Big 12 now, right?
But all those teams are doing all those programs are doing those things, and then they're getting a recruiting boost by going to a power conference.
They did that against the group of 5.
Correct.
They're accomplishing those records. Houston's not going 12-1.
No, I would. But I mean, they're not going to right away. But I mean, Houston is if not one of, if it might be the most fertile recruiting football recruiting ground in the country.
Sure, we'll see if they can take advantage of that.
Yeah, we'll see if they can take advantage of that, and that'll be on Houston to do that. But the potential is huge, and you see Central Florida, the potential is huge. We'll see what Luke Fickell does at Cincinnati. He's got a reason to stay there now, moving to a power conference. I'm not saying like I said, at the top end, the Big 10 is definitely better. Nobody's arguing that. I would argue that's Steven. Oh no.
So you're saying
this is where you have Lawrence Taylor step in and say, don't smoke crack.
So the Big 12, I'm going to rehash.
There are more good teams in the Big 12 than there are in the Big 10 as a percentage.
Okay. All right.
I mean, who's the second
when
right
I
now?
Say good. I'm not talking about you snuck into a bowl game at 6-6. I'm talking like Wisconsin good, Minnesota good. I'm talking
Minnesota's
about.
Not. I wouldn't call Minnesota, Wisconsin good. I mean, they're fine. But.
Well, Minnesota went 9-4 and curb stomped West Virginia. Which conference does West Virginia play? Which conference does West Virginia play in? Levi?
Horrible division.
What conference does West Virginia play in? Let's remind our.
12. What?
Okay. Well, I'm just saying they went 9-4 and curb stomped West Virginia. Okay, so
West Virginia wasn't good this year. They were
matched up in a bowl game.
That's
They had
unfortunate
similar
for
records.
Minnesota. That's really unfortunate for Minnesota.
They had
Because
like
West
records.
Virginia was terrible this year. In the
My
Big 12.
bottom line point on the Big Ten is that there are, I could count them up, but I won't, 6 to 7 programs that are really strong, like nationally strong, top 25 programs. Not just decent, like we're going to get to a bowl game, like
and
Maryland.
Kansas is
Not
the only
counting
program
Maryland.
that hasn't. Kansas is the only Big 12 program that hasn't ranked in the top 25 in the last 5 years. So
You mean at some point in the season?
right? But look at the other programs, and Texas Tech. I guess Texas Tech probably hasn't. But they're trending up now. But we'll see. Look at
Wait. What programs haven't been ranked in the top 25 for the Big Ten? I would say Rutgers and Illinois.
Has Maryland? I don't know.
Yes, multiple times.
I don't care about Maryland football.
Okay,
Illinois.
You don't have to care about them, but they've been ranked in the top 25.
Yeah, I don't know. But
This-
what I'm
Okay.
saying here though is that there's a greater percentage of the Big 12 that is a good football program than there is in the Big 10. Nobody Purdue has had blips here and there with Rondale Moore and stuff like that, but generally speaking, kind of a bad football program.
okay,
Yes,
come
they
on
are.
now. Did you say Purdue's a bad football program?
Illinois has not been good. Just because Iowa can't beat them doesn't mean they're good. But Illinois,
Coming from an Iowa State guy, Mark, isn't that brilliant?
what? I can talk objectively and still say that I cheer for a program that sucked for a long time.
So Purdue.
The blog I write for is literally named after us sucking at football. Nobody here is more aware of that than me.
All right, so can we return to what we left on?
Yeah.
This
So
rant?
where was the point? Where was the
original point that I was making was this is just me, and I don't believe from fans that I associate with that Iowa fans look at the Cyhawk game as a meter, right? To grade Kirk Ferentz and the program. I just don't. Now, listen, you lose to Iowa State, it's one more loss, it's one less trophy, it's a rivalry loss that sucks, but it's no more important to me as a fan than the Iowa-Wisconsin game or the Iowa-Purdue game. It's just not. It sucks to lose it because it's a rivalry, right? But it's not going to change how I view the state of the program. And again, Levi, for
That's
the
where
record,
Iowa State fans are with the game too, for the most part.
I've got people on here every week saying that I'm overly critical of Kirk Ferentz and this and that. So I'm not trying to sound like a homer. that's not how I grade Iowa.
And like I said, I don't think anybody's graded Matt Campbell that way either. I mean, it's we'd like to beat Iowa, but
Oh, I'm not going to argue with that. I don't know.
Yeah,
how people grade Matt Campbell.
The way I view this is that both sides of this that week we're at it. We're we're at it that week, and then after that we're moving to conference season. Iowa's focusing on their Big Ten West, and Iowa State's focusing on the Big 12. That's you gear up for the the week, maybe the 2 weeks around, the 2 weeks before the game or whatever, and after that you're moving on. Type of thing, and that, like he said, nobody's grading Kirk Ferentz on his ability to beat Iowa State because if he did, because he would have got fired in the 2000s. But so they obviously don't. And if Iowa State was grading Matt Campbell on their ability to beat Iowa, Iowa State won 8 of 10 or something shit like that. I don't even remember what it was, but they won a bunch in a row.
You realize you sound exactly like a Nebraska fan, Levi. Seriously, you go
for,
5 to 6 more years behind where you're at right now in the early
Right.
2000s. You're literally talking Nebraska delirium.
Well, right, but the Iowa State is a significantly better football program than Nebraska is right now. But anyways,
okay, all right.
the point here, though, the point here is that Iowa State fans would like to beat Iowa, but it's not. Nobody's if Matt Campbell continues to challenge for Big 12 titles and he never beats Iowa, nobody here is going to care.
I think Iowa State's in better shape than Nebraska, to your point, because Nebraska moved on to a better conference. But in terms of looking at these two teams, I don't know that Iowa State's significantly better than Nebraska, a team that only lost to Oklahoma.
Listen, here's an early prediction. Nebraska will win more games than Iowa State this year. That's an early prediction. That might be a bold statement, but maybe. I would not be surprised to see
I don't know.
Nebraska.
I don't know what Nebraska's schedule looks like or anything like that, but I mean, what's the over under for them? 8.5 or something? 7.5?
No, it's not that high.
I don't know.
I don't think it's that high.
Because I think Iowa State's over under came in at 7.5, which I thought was probably a little high, but
Yeah,
I would say they're probably going to be pretty close.
For the record, Nebraska does get Oklahoma again, so it's not like they've got
So
a
does
cushy.
Iowa State. So
Sure, but Nebraska, okay. Nebraska also gets the Big Ten, so, But I'm just saying, at a conference, it's not like they're going to rack up wins. I think in Iowa State, Nebraska, I don't know why Iowa State and Nebraska don't schedule a home and home.
Losing that game was a travesty. Like that should be a yearly game.
Absolutely.
Now it's tough because then you'd be because with Iowa State playing 9 conference games every year, you'd expect Iowa State to play 9 conference games plus Iowa plus Nebraska and then only get like one softer opponent. You'd be to play another Power 5 program beyond Iowa in the non-conference while they're playing 9 conference games would kind of be expecting them to take on an undue schedule burden for a non-blue blood, basically. Like if you're Alabama, you can get away with that, but like
Alabama doesn't do that though.
But Alabama doesn't even do that. Right. That's my point. Is like nobody schedules that hard of a schedule for them. Nobody willingly schedules that hard of a schedule for themselves. So like that's part of that's a major reason why Iowa State doesn't. They play a lot of the same schedule every year.
There are some examples out there I could give.
Yeah, but those are the exception, not the rule for the most.
Oh,
part.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So like that's why Iowa State's schedule kind of looks the same every year for right now. Is because they're kind of with the 9 conference games in Iowa, they're pretty much locked into that plus two other games against like a G5 and an FCS or something like that. But
Corey's going to be somewhat familiar with the statement I'm about to make because I make it about Iowa, but I make it to the extreme with Iowa State. You do have the most boring schedule in college football because of what you just cited.
Right. Yeah,
because there's no leeway in the conference schedule. To the Big 12's credit, everyone plays everyone, and it's the most legitimate, valid conference schedule because everybody plays everyone. So there's no mystery as to who are we playing this year out of division. And then you're locked in the Iowa game. So then the other 2 games are FCS/Group of 5 games.
Well, not only does everybody play everybody, but the conference title game is the first and second best teams in the conference. So it's not even like everybody plays everybody, and then you still have a random division winner like the old Big 12 with the North and the South or something like that. So, yeah, that was my only point with that. But,
Mark, what was your original question that you posed to me? Because we kind of went off the rails there.
It was basically that we've been critical of Kirk Ferentz, even though we greatly respect him, think he's a top-flight coach, critical of his handling of the team in certain areas, and then not, to Levi's point, completing a championship run of the entire conference for a long, long time. Would the criticism on him be, or has there been less criticism on him from the Iowa fan base because he's been recently dominant in this game?
Yeah, again, I don't think so. In fact, I think it's actually intensified in the past few years. And primarily that comes down to one item, one person, and his name is Brian Ferentz. That's why it's been intensified over the years, because as Brian Ferentz's tenure continues and the offense continues to be terrible, that's what it is, then, so again, I don't think there has any relation to the Iowa State series because, yeah, as time goes on, you'd think if there was a correlation that Iowa fans would be, grow more and more fond of Kirk Ferentz. But I think as just time goes by, expectations do change, rightfully so. And especially when you're dealing with your son and you're dealing with accusations of nepotism, if you win, that's different. Like if Brian Ferentz wins, like this year, all of a sudden Brian Ferentz has a top 50 offense, Mark, then nobody's going to care that it's his son. Nobody's going to care about that. But
Brian Ferentz is my favorite Hawkeye coach.
Well, I guess he's the only reason Iowa State's even played Iowa close over the past 6-7 games, right? So, but again, I think the bottom line is Iowa fans, for the most part, they get involved with the Cyhawk game the week of, but it's not a telltale sign of how Iowa fans are going to rate the program.
The comment that you have on the screen there from the Real Hayden or whatever, it's like if Iowa State doesn't care about the Iowa game, like Corey said, I think both schools care about it. I mean, to pretend that either school doesn't care about it is nonsense, whatever. But like we care about it in that it's a state rivalry, it's state bragging rights, it's a big, huge event for the state, makes a ton of money for the state or whatever. But we're not measuring a coach's success. Like you're not hiring and firing a coach based on whether they win the Cyhawk game. Like that's Paul Rhodes won the Cyhawk game his second last year, and he was still shit, and he got canned the next year or whatever. So like you're not hiring and firing coaches based on the Cyhawk game. That's not the same thing as not caring about the game. Both schools care deeply about the game. Just it's not the only measuring stick.
Because I'll make a comparison that Ohio State and Michigan. So we're talking about a program in Ohio State where the fan base believes, whether it's legit or not, that they're going to win a national championship every year. Like that's what we're trying to do. That's kind of the goal and purpose and the stated expectation, whether it's realistic for that particular year or not. But there have been like massive polls. I'm not talking about a Twitter poll with 48 respondents. I'm talking about massive Ohio State polls. Would you rather win a national championship? And again, this is a fan base that's what they're gunning for, or beat Michigan. If you won a national championship and lost to Michigan, would that be successful? They would rather beat Michigan than win a national championship. So that's why I'm just leveraging that against this rivalry to see how important this game is.
I think it could be kind of like that. I don't know if I'm quite that far, but like if Iowa State and Iowa were in the same conference, this would be probably an entirely different conversation. Because then it would be like,
True.
Not only do we want to win, but then it matters for the rest of the season too. But
Yeah.
while they're non-conference rivals, that like we want to beat them dearly that week, but then we still have our own conference to focus on. That's kind of the ceiling for it while they're not conference rivals.
So I do have a question for you, Levi, as it relates to the Iowa State roster. You lose Breece Hall, you lose Brock Purdy. You're losing what, two top tier tight ends,
Charlie Kohler and Chase Allen. Yep.
You lose Mike Rose. So there's obviously a lot of turnover.
Yep.
My question to you is, what's the biggest hole that you don't believe was filled this spring that you're most concerned about heading into summer conditioning and fall camp?
The biggest concern as far as a position group for me would still be the offensive line, like I talked about earlier. If you want to like a kind of a more original answer, I guess, because like I feel like the offensive line is always like these guys need to get. I mean Iowa always has a good offensive line, but I mean I have to imagine it's still a pretty like where most of the time they're either above average to very 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 good. So, but it's still a concern. Like you said, like the offensive line for Iowa really needs to have it together to move the ball, and it's no different for any other team. So, but I would say it's the biggest concern right now is the offensive line, just making sure that Hunter Dekkers has time to throw, and all that. But if it's somewhere other than that, I would say corner, because corner has been in John Haycock's scheme. Corner is able to sort of like if you have corners that are just okay, you can kind of cover it up in John Haycock's scheme where they can do their job and they'll be fine. Now they've had good corners. Anthony Johnson's a very good corner. He's been an All Big 12 player basically his entire career. But he's moved back to safety now to help with that position. Plus, it'll from what I understand too, he's gotten feedback from the NFL that'll be better for his pro prospects too, is to play safety as opposed to corner. And I think he'll be a very, very good safety, just like Iowa State has had very good safeties, the entire time Matt Campbell's been here. But right now, the new starters. So the new starters at corner are TJ Tampa and probably TJ Tampa and Miles Purchase. Both guys, neither of them have really started a lot of games. TJ Tampa's, I think maybe he's got a start or two. And Miles Purchase played a lot more towards the end of the season. He played a ton of snaps against Clemson. But those guys are very talented, but they're young. And if teams decide to pick on them, that'll be a big test for them. I think they both have humongous upside. I think they both can be very, very, very good. Can both be very good corners. But they have to prove themselves. So that's. I don't know if it wasn't addressed so much, but that's a big question mark outside of the offensive line. Is that young talent gonna develop and be the corner that I would see? Because I think safety will be just fine. I'm not worried about linebacker. They still have a Ryan Vance there, and they've got some really good depth there that have played a ton of snaps. They got Colby Reeder, who is a linebacker from Delaware State, who is a Mike Rose clone. If you watch him play on tape, he looks identical to Mike Rose. Kind of like how I always talked about how Jake Hummel is virtually indistinguishable from Mike Rose. Colby Reeder is pretty indistinguishable from either of those two as well. So he'll fit right in. Ryan Vance is good. Jerry Vaughn has played a ton of snaps for Iowa State. Linebackers will be fine. The defensive line should be pretty good. Still got Will McDonald back there. Again, still got Will McDonald there, who's been the most productive pass rusher in the country for the last few years. And so it's corner and offensive line right now.
And here's what I want to say, and I do want to touch on the portal.
Yeah.
But if we were just looking through the Iowa roster turnover and then the Iowa State roster and turnover, there's no question that Iowa State has dealt with more turnover. There's just no question about it.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, if I can tell you this for a fact, that if Iowa had 21 players enter the portal during this past offseason, people would be soiling themselves as we speak. They'd still be soiling themselves because that's 21 players over the course of 6 months or less.
Yeah.
Is there no concern from you? I mean, I from the outside looking in, I think, man, that's a huge freaking number. In perspective, Iowa's had 6, one of which was a walk-on since, this cycle. So 21 players, what's happening there as far as losing players?
Couple things. One is that the reason that Iowa State fans are not panicking about this, one is a lot of the guys that did transfer a lot were mostly depth guys. There's been a couple starters like Ashim Young and Craig McDonald. Another reason is that one of the common denominators about under the Matt Campbell era, no matter what position, including quarterback, has been the ability for guys to step up when their name is called. Kyle Kemp did that. Brock Purdy did that. Mike Rose did that. Actually, not Mike Rose. Mike Rose started from day one. But there's been a bunch of other guys that, when someone went down, when their name was called, they stepped up and they were good. That's been a common denominator in the Matt Campbell era, is that the backups are ready to play. So for that reason, guys that were originally considered to be, they were probably going to be either role players or backup guys, they've also played a bunch of snaps, and there's a lot of confidence in the depth at a lot of these positions. Now, they've had a bunch of safeties transfer out, so that's caused for a little bit of concern on the back end as far as depth goes. We know the top end is good. Anthony Johnson's very good. Bo Freeler is a stud. There's a reason he was taking snaps away from Ashim Young at the end of the year and actually played more snaps versus Clemson than Ashim Young did. He's a stud. Anthony Johnson's very good. The safety is still on the starting safeties are still very, very, very good. The depth behind them is a little bit of a concern because of all those transfers. But another reason too is a lot of some of these, as has been kind of what seems to be self-evident through a lot of these transfers, some of these are NIL casualties. Ashim Young went to Ole Miss. Craig McDonald just announced that he was going to Auburn. These guys are really, these good players that played a lot of snaps. And they're 100%, they're Power 5 players at any program. And part of that has been, and Matt Campbell, it's almost cliche at this point that Matt Campbell's thing is culture. And he's been very clear about this, not publicly, but Jamie Pollard went on a radio show a couple weeks ago, or last week or 2 weeks ago now, talking about the NIL and the transfer situation and stuff like that, is that both TJ Otzelberger and Matt Campbell have been very clear that neither of them are interested in participating in this pay-for-play thing. They want guys that want to be there to play football. And I'm not saying that Ashim Young or Craig McDonald or anybody else was going out hunting for NIL and they just found it and that's what it was. But in this environment, if there is a player that's doing that, they're not a fit for what Matt Campbell's trying to do. And it's been very clear up to that point. And reactions from the player to when some of the other, from the players on the roster, from when people have transferred, they've had somewhat public reactions to it. And the consensus seems very clear that if you are not 100% bought into this, you're not a fit. And if you're hunting around and calling people to try to get NIL money someplace else, you're not a fit for the program, for what Matt Campbell is trying to do, and maintaining that maintaining what the culture that Matt Campbell wants is vital to what he's doing to keeping a program like Iowa State on top. You cannot compromise that at all. And I see this part of this as some attrition due to that. I don't know that any player has done that as far as specific names or anything like that. But it's hard to see what's happening and not see that that's at least some of them. Is that people are looking for NIL money and they're not they're not a fit for the program.
Let me just say this: I don't have any proof to back this up. I have a hard time believing that there's not NIL money. I'm not saying that TJ Otzelberger is specifically offering this to players because, as you know, it's a circus right now. So I have a hard time.
And college basketball is a different world, man.
Yeah, I mean it is.
But college football is.
When you made the comment.
Terrible.
You made the comment that Otzelberger is not participating in NIL pay for play, but you're telling me that Oshuni and other kid from St. Bonaventure. Those kids aren't
Jared
getting
Holmes,
paid to come here. Those kids could have went almost anywhere in the country. And I'll give you a perfect example. And this isn't me just being sour that Osuni didn't come to Iowa, because Iowa fans wanted him, because Iowa did reach out, according to a couple sources. He never even visited Iowa. And I've been told on good word that the reason why he didn't visit Iowa, and the reason Fardaws Aimaq didn't visit Iowa, is because Iowa doesn't have his crap together as it relates to NIL. And yet I continue to see these transfer portal kids visiting Ames. I have a hard time believing there's not NIL money there. There
is. Well, they have the new NIL initiative now that's specifically set up for this stuff. But like, as far as like, and it's kind of hard to say. It's kind of hard to speak exactly what's happening, because nobody knows what's happening behind the scenes at any of these things. It's worth noting that I can't remember what's his last name, Osuni, right?
Oshuni, yeah.
Oshuni, yeah. I've always had trouble pronouncing his name. But the two schools that he was a finalist for were Florida and Iowa State, which is where two of his teammates went. So that was clearly a factor for him. And Iowa obviously does not have one of his teammates. I don't know if that was how big a factor that was. I don't know that he's not been guaranteed some NIL deal. I don't know that. But what I do know is that TJ Otzelberger, Matt Campbell, and Jamie Pollard are all kind of cut from this cloth. That they're here to play to play college football and basketball, and to do things in a way that, you know, like I think Jamie Pollard said it on the radio, that like both Matt Campbell and TJ Otzelberger said that if we're going to have to do this pay for play thing, they'd rather go down to D3. And I was like, and honestly, that checks out completely for both of them. You know, Matt Campbell literally did play D3 football, and TJ Otzelberger played basketball at a really, really small school too. I mean, those guys are from programs that are, you go there because you love playing football or you love playing basketball. You don't go there for money or for pro potential. You know, like Mount Union has produced a lot of pro players, but you don't go to Mount Union because you think you're going to go to the NFL. Or you don't go to where I don't even know where TJ Otzelberger played basketball. But he went to a very small school. You don't do that if you're trying to make it to the NBA. You're doing it because you love playing basketball and you love playing football. And that's the kind of guys, Matt Campbell's a football guy. TJ Otzelberger's a basketball guy. So do I know for sure that, that those St. Bonaventure guys haven't been guaranteed some sort of, like, there's an NIL package for you waiting here? Because, well, like I said, there is the official 501c3 nonprofit initiative that's very public. It's there. So they know that that's there. So that is, I'm sure that was probably at least a little bit of a factor. But, I'm inclined to believe, based on prior history and everything that I've read and know about these guys, that they're not really interested. Like, you're not going to be seeing like huge high school recruits or something like that only coming here because of NIL money. They're not playing that very transparent pay for play game that we're seeing USC play and stuff like that.
So before we wrap this up, Mark, because I know we've hit our hour, and I feel like we've talked a lot of stuff relating to Iowa and Iowa State football, but we haven't really looked at the game specifically. I do think, and I asked this question to Tyler Merriam talking about South Dakota State last week, but I do believe that, once again, Iowa State has an opportunity to create turnovers, specifically getting pressure in the backfield. I don't know what Iowa's offensive line is going to look like as far as pass protection. I really have no clue. The offensive line did not look good in spring. It didn't look good last year. You lose Cody Ince, Kyler Schott, Tyler Linderbaum. But the problem is Iowa State really didn't take advantage of it last year. And things kind of spiral out of control when you turn the ball over, and that was a Purdy problem. And a big part of that, I'll just say this, if I recall, and I haven't watched that game back here in recent months, but a big part of that game was Iowa State had problems protecting Purdy, specifically against stunt action from Iowa.
The offensive line was having a lot of trouble getting holes open for Brees.
Well, that too.
Yeah. It's because, that offense was, you establish Brees and you make the defense really account for Brees, and then you do lots of play action RPOs and stuff like that. I would say that he did get pulled later in the game, but I really, there's at least a couple of, like, I think he threw 3 picks. I think at least 2 of them are probably not his fault. The first one, that long pass to Xavier, it was a long pass down the middle to Xavier Hutchinson. I thought Xavier didn't do a very good job of helping his quarterback there and either going up for the pass or trying to deflect it down. Maybe it wasn't a great pass, but I think he was open and Xavier didn't do a good job. And one of the other ones was deflected over to Riley Moss. Like, that was kind of a freak play. Hankins. That's what it was. It was kind of a freak play. So I would call at least 2 of them kind of, either a freak play or not really his fault. But he didn't have the best game. I don't think anybody would say that wasn't Brock Purdy's best game, obviously.
And it just seems like turnovers are always a big factor in this game. It's not usually a real high scoring game. You know, obviously throwing out the Stanley versus the guy I can never remember from Georgia that year.
Jacob Park.
That year. And then, of course, the Steele Jantz year.
Yeah, there's a couple blips where it's these huge scoring games, but most of the time it's just this big, terrible mess of a football game.
Right. So turnovers are usually a big deal. Obviously, we know back the first game there, Mark, you remember the punt gaff, right? That really determined the outcome in that game.
That's still my profile picture in our group Slack channel is Dejon Young running into Tariq Milton.
That I still listen to somebody uploaded that on YouTube with the song Crash in the background, and I still listen to or watch that replay. But I do think turnovers are going to be huge. Can Iowa State protect Deckers, and can Deckers make because it does seem like Iowa was able, at least in recent years, get more pressure on quarterbacks, even when they don't have great individual personnel. Like since Epinesa left, it hasn't been great. Golston was a good pass rusher, but they haven't had anybody elite since the Nelson-Epinesa tandem. But yet Iowa seems to, early in seasons, be able to create pressure through this stunt action. And then as the season wears on, teams start to see it on tape and be able to make adjustments. So early on, my guess is Phil Parker will have something in store for Deckers and this offensive line. And that I think is the key. Can Deckers make good decisions under pressure? And if not, then Iowa's going to prey on turnovers. And the secondary is going to eat. Because Iowa's defense, as much as I've been critical of Iowa's offense, Iowa's defense is going to be elite. Because I can't really think of any real big holes. I think there's some question marks along the defensive line. But on the other end, the one overarching theme from spring ball was how great the defensive line looked. You've got three linebackers that wreaked havoc on Iowa State last year that are back in Jacobs, Campbell, and Benson. You've got Riley Moss back. You've got Jamari Harris and Terry Roberts back. You've got Xavier Wampa. Who knows where he's going to play, but my guess is he'll play. So I just think it's going to be key for Iowa State to be able to protect Deckers, and if they can, it's really going to be hinged upon can he make decisions, split-second decisions, and this will be his second start ever. And who does Iowa State open with?
Southeast Missouri State, I think.
Southeast Missouri State?
It's like a directional Missouri State. I mean, let me pull it up. Maybe it's just Missouri State.
Holy cow.
I think it's just Missouri State, which actually, as FCS programs go, is actually not a bad FCS program. But wow. But it's still, I think it's just Missouri State.
So Iowa's, as you know, Iowa's opening with South Dakota State. So they're both FCS schools, but South Dakota State's one of the best FCS schools in the country.
Missouri State's, I don't know if they're South Dakota State good, but Missouri State's generally speaking regarded fairly well.
Oh, okay.
Missouri State.
Okay.
It is Southeast Missouri State.
Okay. It's not.
I thought that's what it was.
It's Southeast Missouri State.
Southeast Missouri. Well,
I've got no analysis for you.
Because the Southwest Missouri State, that's actually Missouri State, correct, Mark?
This is SEMO.
I believe so.
Missouri.
Don't even.
Maybe it is just Southeast Missouri.
Wow.
I don't know, but
wow.
That's what it is. Yep.
That's incredible.
Southeast Missouri Red Hawks.
I tell you, that is incredible.
Yeah. Honestly though, like I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay with the cupcake game to start off with because you need to get that offense in a rhythm. Like you said,
but you're going to go from 0 to 60. Hunter Deckers is going to go from 0 to 60.
That's where Iowa State kind of gets screwed a little bit. Well, both teams kind of do, but it being the second game of the year makes this a really weird deal. If this, I still think this game should be played in November in rivalry week with everybody else. It'd be a much better game if it was played in November. But it's
apparently not that important to play during rivalry week. That's what I was hearing like 20 minutes ago.
No, I think we both said it was an important game, just that you're not measuring a coach by it. But anyways, look at, was it 2018 or 2019? I can't remember which one it was, but the 2018, because it was 2018 because Iowa State had a game against South Dakota State that started with that got canceled by lightning. So Iowa was the first game of the season. So that wasn't even 0 to 100 in 1 week. That was week 0. Week 1, you're at Iowa. Having to go from weakish opponent to Iowa is not really.
Let me just say this. I do think there's an element of, and Levi won't agree with this, but this is the last thing I'll say, Mark, and then we can wrap this thing up. And I will give him a chance to respond. But here's what I'll say about College Game Day. All right. The 2 times that Ames has hosted College Game Day, there's been a lot of hype and expectations around Iowa State to win that game. And both times Iowa has felt kind of, I think, like the underdog. And let's be honest, as much as people want to say that Kirk Ferentz is boring and old, those are the times when Kirk Ferentz's style fits perfectly, because his guys aren't going to get rattled by game day and by being on ABC. And I'm not saying for a certainty that Iowa State got rattled. I do think there's reason to believe in 19 they got rattled.
The first time was probably a little bit.
And last year, it sure looked like Purdy was rattled. I mean, maybe that was just because of the game. And I do think it was dumb that they wore black jerseys on a day where it's like 90 degrees. That was just stupid. Levi, I said that to you before the game that week. I said, why are they wearing black jerseys? It was dumb.
I don't see it, but they've got cool benches and they've got fans.
Well, good Lord, it was like 100 on the field.
But they were wearing white helmets and white pants, so that's probably that. Anyways.
But I do think it's listen. Game day, I seriously doubt game day will be there week 2.
They won't be this year. No, that would be 3 Cyhawk games in a row. There's no way.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And Mark, I did not realize that it was already official that Ohio State Oregon was the first College Game Day of the year, and I also didn't realize they don't go anywhere week 0. Is that correct?
Ohio State Notre Dame,
or excuse me, what did I say? Oregon, Ohio State Notre Dame week 1. They don't go anywhere week 0. Am I correct? Because I keep seeing these.
I believe they did last season to an FCS game, but they typically stay in studio.
Okay. So, but no, I do think that will play to Iowa State's advantage, being able to go on the road. They'll be the underdogs this year, no question about it. They will be the decided underdogs. And there's an opportunity there to finally reclaim that role, because I think Iowa State maybe has been hurt a bit by the expectations in that game. And now it's time for Iowa to handle those. And we'll see. I think it'll be lively. It'll be hot, I'm sure. I don't expect it to be a night game, but I guess we'll wait and see. I'm looking forward to it, Mark.
I think what makes this game really interesting is that the unknowns for Iowa State are like the new faces are at quarterback and running back, and the ones that really determine your ceiling on offense and stuff like that. And it's interesting, like you said, Phil Parker probably has something. I don't even know what the offense is going to look like this this season, because you have different weapons. You have instead of kind of a more, Jarrell Brock is kind of more of a power back. He's elusive, but he's more of a power back. And you've got more talent and speed at receiver. You've got a quarterback that's got a ton of arm talent, a big time arm. So theoretically, you should be able to push the ball down the field a little bit more. I don't know if they will. How much they'll show against in the first game, I have no idea. The floor is a little bit lower for Iowa State. It's probably every bit as higher, maybe a little bit higher on offense for Iowa State, just because of skill position. And there's more confidence in the quarterback position, because I'm assuming Petras is still the starter, right?
I mean, that hasn't been officially. I believe that he will start.
Petras or is it PD is the other one? Either way, the confidence is probably fairly tepid, at least to start off with. And whereas Hunter Decker's, Iowa State fans have a lot of confidence in Hunter Decker's, and the coaching staff has been raving about it.
If there's anything positive to take with Petras, is he played well for a stretch in that Iowa State game. He made some nice throws. So if there's one team where you could say, you could argue that he played his best football in the second quarter at Iowa State last year. So if he's playing in that game, that can be something that he kind of takes and uses as confidence.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. There's a lot of interesting things that could change with Iowa State football, as far as maybe it's a more explosive, an offense that's aimed at being more explosive. The defense maybe looks a little bit different, because now you have Will McDonald back, and maybe you choose to run some more 4-down stuff to get Will McDonald better pass rushing opportunities. To let him go, especially if Iowa's got questions on the offensive line and they struggle in week 1 or something like that. Maybe they try to find more stuff for Will McDonald to really try to wreak havoc there and cause a lot of trouble. So, like you said, it's an interesting opportunity for Iowa State. Kinnick's a hard place to play. It's tough. My confidence is not. I don't have no confidence forever. I just feel like if I was a betting man, I'd probably put my money on Iowa. But that said, 56-10 clones.
And one more note too. Another guy that's in the transfer portal for Iowa State that has been a factor in these Iowa games has been Tariq Milton. He is gone, right?
Yeah, he transferred.
Where did he transfer? Did he land somewhere?
Florida A&M.
Because he was a factor a couple of years ago in that Cyhawk game.
He was. I think Jalen Noel, I think, is every bit as good as he. I think Jalen Noel can easily fill that role. He's a little bit more fluid of a runner. I think he's every bit as fast as Tariq Milton is. I mean, I'm not concerned with replacing Tariq Milton. Jalen Noel played a ton last year. He played really, really well. You still got Xavier Hutchinson there. New freshman, watch out for your name, is Greg Gaines. Very good 4-star receiver. Excellent player. I'm sure he'll get lots of playing time. I'm not too worried about replacing him. I think the skill position talent on offense is really, really impressive. You may even see like 3 or 4 running backs in the game, because even the 4th string guys, a brand new true freshman named Cartevious Norton. I watched him. They had 3 open practices this spring that I went and watched, and the 4th string running back right now is really good. Very, very impressed with him. And Deion Silas and Eli Sanders both played some last year and stuff like that. And they played very well. So we'll see. It's the offensive line. If the offensive line is good, the potential for the Iowa State offense is very, very high.
And I would not be surprised. I'm not predicting this, Levi or Mark, but I would not be shocked if this is one of those years where Iowa wins comfortably in this game. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but just given the dynamic, it could, because of Iowa State being this will be their first test with a new quarterback, with new everything, and Iowa's just going to have a really, really steady. They know what they're doing, and so not predicting that, but
it's probably more. It's more likely that Iowa blows out Iowa State than it is that Iowa State blows out Iowa.
Absolutely, yes.
I don't know if it's like by a huge margin, but I would lean Iowa. If you're picking a blowout, it's probably Iowa has a better shot at it. But I still think the overwhelming favorite is that it's a close, fairly low-scoring, terrible football game. That's what it always is.
I agree.
Well, I am off and running, ironically, to a team we were discussing minutes ago. Our Nebraska Live show is coming up in just a couple minutes, so head on over if you want more college football talk on our Nebraska show, again, on the Nebraska channel in just a few minutes. Corey, you got to get his work from the Hawkeye of the Storm. And certainly he will keep you up to date on both Iowa football and basketball. And our guy, got to find the adjacent
the
banner. There we go. Levi, appreciate you being here. Track Levi's work at SB Nation on Wide Right Natty Light. Is there anything else that people need to know about your work and where they can find you?
That's the main one. I'm gonna be. We can talk about it later. I have another project coming up here. I started new LLC and all this, whatever. But anyways,
okay,
yeah,
it's a massive audience you could get your project out to right now.
I've got enough projects on my plate now. I probably shouldn't have started this one, but that's okay.
Levi, we appreciate it. It's always fun, and we will track you down the week of the game, I'm sure.
Oh, you're counting on it.
Absolutely. Everybody back here next Tuesday at 4:30 Central.